What's up guys, it's Chris Majestic, and today we're going to compare my favorite two laser TVs, which is the Samsung LSP9T and the Hisense L9G. Now I'll tell you right off the bat that out of all of the ultra short throw projectors that I've reviewed so far, these are definitely my favorites. Now I do have a couple more that I want to test out before I do my yearly best projector video, but I'll tell you these are very likely to stay in the top spot. So in this video, I'm going to go over the similarities of these two projectors, then I'll go over the detailed differences, and then give you my thoughts on which one I like better. Alright, so first let's go over the similarities. So both of these projectors use a 3-laser DLP system with the red, green, and blue laser. They both use pixel shifting to display a 4K image. Both have great built-in speakers which work well for TV, even though I still recommend a separate speaker system. And they both have 3 HDMI ports with eARC support. Alright, so what are the major differences? Well, first let's start with the price. The Hisense L9G has a retail price of $5,500 for the 100-inch version and $6,000 for the 120-inch version, and both versions come with a screen. The Samsung retails for $6,500 and doesn't include a screen, but it supports screen sizes from 100 inches to 130 inches. Alright, next up, let's talk about design. The Samsung comes in white and has a minimalistic design with a light gray fabric across the front. The Hisense comes in black and has a few accents that stand out, such as a small LED strip on the front and a glitter pattern on top. Both of these projectors have adjustable feet on the bottom, but the Samsung only has 2 adjustable feet for the front, while the Hisense has adjustable feet on all 4 corners, giving it a bit more flexibility when aiming it on the screen. So the Samsung has a throw ratio of 0.19 to 1, while the Hisense has a 0.25 to 1 throw ratio. This means the Samsung sits significantly closer to the screen and doesn't require you to pull your TV stand away from the wall like the Hisense. And speaking of installation, as I mentioned earlier, Samsung has a manual focus that allows it to produce an image from 100 to 130 inches. While the Hisense can only do 100 inches or 120 inches. You can't go any bigger and you can't go anywhere in between, which means you're stuck with whatever image size you buy, which kinda sucks. Alright, so next let's talk about brightness. So the Samsung is rated at 2800 ANSI lumens versus 3000 on the Hisense. Now numbers don't really mean much, so I wanted to show how they look in a room with ambient light. Now I found it a bit difficult to get constant sunlight in the middle of the day, so I'm using high-powered studio lights to mimic sunlight and keep things equal and fair. And for all the tests in this video, I'll be using a 100-inch lenticular CLR screen, which works best when rejecting overhead light. It's important to keep in mind that sunlight from nearby windows doesn't emit light from above, so this will be a bit of a stress test and make the projectors look their worst, so I'm only doing this to show you which one looks better in a really bright room. So again, this is in dynamic mode, which provides the brightest image. Now dynamic mode does oversaturate the colors quite a bit and adds a green hue to everything, but it does help to cut through the ambient light. And as you can see, the Hisense is slightly brighter, which is expected since the Hisense has a slightly higher ANSI lumen rating. The important thing to keep in mind here is that even with the Hisense being brighter, it's still producing significantly more accurate color than the Samsung, even in its brightest mode. Alright, so here is a more realistic scenario, and as you can see, neither of these projectors have a problem cutting through this type of light. And while we're on the topic of brightness, we need to briefly talk about laser speckle. It's nearly impossible to pick this up on camera, but the best way to describe it is that the projected image has a bit of a glittery effect, which can be a bit distracting, especially when projecting white. Now, some people say they can't see it, and others have returned the Samsung to the store because they couldn't unsee it. I tried everything I could do to get rid of it, including trying a different screen and making the image really huge, but it was still there. I guess it depends on whether or not it bothers you, but this is definitely something to think about, especially considering its high price tag. And when it comes to HDR, both of these projectors look absolutely fantastic, but I do have to say that the Samsung does a better job with shadow detail, and its tone mapping results in a more natural looking image, even though I do slightly prefer the colors of the Hisense. This might be subjective, as some people might prefer more contrast, but the Samsung might have a slight edge here. Looking at detail in dark parts of the video appears to reveal more detail on the Samsung. And the cool part is that you can always add contrast if you don't like the way it looks, so you get a good amount of flexibility that you don't get from the Hisense. Now that's not to say that the Hisense doesn't look good, since they both look great. I just think this is a matter of preference, so I'll let you guys be the judge here. Alright, so moving on to black levels. Now, when I originally reviewed the Samsung after reviewing the Hisense, I immediately noticed that it has slightly better black levels. So after measuring the black levels from both of these projectors, this was confirmed, but I found out that it only tells half the story. So with both projectors in movie mode, I measured 2.8 lux from the Hisense and 1.8 lux from the Samsung. Well, here's where things get interesting. So the Hisense has an ambient light sensor, which is helpful considering the projector is so bright. Well, when you activate the ambient light sensor, it drops the laser luminance, which drops the black levels on the Hisense down to 1.8 lux, which is nearly the same as the Samsung. So long story short, if you use the ambient light sensor on the Hisense, then the Samsung doesn't really have a major advantage in black levels. Alright, so now let's move on to the OS. So Samsung runs Tizen OS and the Hisense runs full Android TV. Both of these are fantastic and the menu systems are easy to navigate and make sense. Now, one major benefit that the Samsung has over the Hisense is that it has the Netflix app, which is missing on the Hisense. Now, on the other hand, Android TV on the Hisense has access to a lot more apps overall, including a ton of games that you won't find on the Samsung, and Android TV is a bit snappier overall. There were a few times where I experienced a little bit of lag in Tizen OS, while the Android TV interface on the Hisense was nice and fluid. So both of these projectors come with voice remotes, and even though I like the design of the Samsung remote more, the Hisense remote was a bit more functional. Not only does it have app shortcut buttons, but it was easier to quickly pull up menu settings versus the Samsung remote. And the speakers on both of these projectors are above average, even though I recommend a separate speaker system either way. And they both have eARC, so you can send lossless Dolby Atmos to your home theater receiver or soundbar, even though I did have trouble sending Atmos from Plex or Disney Plus from the Samsung. And one sound-related feature that you'll only find on the Hisense is WiSA support built in, which allows you to connect WiSA-enabled speakers, which is pretty cool. Alright, so what about fan noise? Well, even though both of these projectors are fairly quiet, after testing with the sound meter, it looks like the Hisense is a few decibels louder than the Samsung. Now again, both of these projectors are pretty quiet, but the Hisense does have a bit of a low-pitched hum. And finally, let's talk about gaming and video format support. So one advantage that Hisense has is that it supports 4K at 120 Hz, as can be seen on the HDMI ports. Well, even though this might have you think that you can get 4K at 120 frames per second, Hisense informed me that the DLP system is actually 60 Hz, so your frame rate will be limited to 60 FPS. So honestly, I'm not really sure of the purpose of this. If I'm missing something and this carries some other benefit, please drop a comment in the comment section and let me know. And aside from refresh rate, both projectors have decent input lag numbers. I measured the Hisense around 35 milliseconds for 1080p and 32 milliseconds for 4K, and on the Samsung I got an average of 47 milliseconds for both 4K and 1080p. Now, even though the Hisense does have a bit of an edge here with slightly lower input lag, hardcore gamers want input lag far less than 20 milliseconds, so we're kinda splitting hairs here. Alright, so now that I've gone over all the differences, which one do I think is the best? Well, this is not really an easy question to answer since each projector has benefits over the other, and it really depends on your use case. If you're not sensitive to the laser speckle issue, then the Samsung makes a really strong case with its amazing throw ratio and HDR performance, even though it's pretty expensive and doesn't come with a screen. On the other hand, the Hisense has slightly better daytime performance, a better OS, and has slightly less input lag, but it has a fixed focus, so you're stuck with whatever screen size you go with, and the throw ratio is not nearly as good as the Samsung. If I had to say which one would give you the best bang for your buck, then I would probably say it would be the Hisense, even if you go with the 120-inch version. Either way, I'll let you guys decide which one you think is better, so I want to see your thoughts in the comments section. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and make sure you mash that like button for me. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you go ahead and do that and hit that bell notification so you don't miss anything, especially since I have more reviews coming up. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.